Okay, so we are live and we're recording.
Okay.
We got everything up and running. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who haven't been here or are new to Enriched Parenting, we're a nonprofit. I started a few years back. Our mission is really to just spread education and awareness on how to better our family's health and well-being, and just really giving people the education and the key tools to be empowered in bettering their family's health and navigating all of the things that arise, when it comes to our decisions for our children, for our family. So today we're so excited. We have actually our expert, Chana Silverstein, who is an author of the book Mootopia. She is also a master herbalist, classical homeopath, a board certified lactation consultant, doula, and she's actually a mother of 7. She has actually, I think you've been to over like 450 births, correct, as a doula as well?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Yeah. So we're really excited to have her here with us today. And we're going to be presenting on how to keep our children healthy this winter. So I think we all could benefit from these tools and tips that she's going to be sharing with us today. Sarahana, are you able to access on your end the slides?
No, I can't.
Okay.
So if you switch it for me, that would be great.
Yeah, so I could do that. No problem.
Okay.
So you'll just put your finger up and then I'll know to switch it. How about that?
Okay, switch it right now. Great.
Okay.
So thank you everybody for coming. Prevention is best. We always want to be one step ahead, but we know that Hashem always throws things in our ways that we're not, expecting. So I wanted to begin with this slide because I wanted to show the power of a cough or a sneeze. I think this kind of blows our minds and makes us go, oh my God, that's impossible. So that is a cold and a sneeze, and you can see the bacteria and viruses just shoot out across the room. And the question is not, how do we get rid of bacteria or viruses in the world, but how do we build up our immune system so someone can sneeze or cough around us and we can still resist and not be overtaken by that bacteria or virus. When our children have drippy, goopy noses, it acts like flypaper, and the bacteria and viruses will just stick to that. So with herbal medicine, our goal is the second that we see a little disruption in our children's typical health, we take action, give them herbs, use some aromatherapy right away. We don't want to wait until the child is very, very ill, but if the child is very, very ill, we can absolutely go ahead and help them. So if you'll switch the slide, thanks.
Just happened.
Oh, okay.
there we go. Oh,
okay, the next one, yeah. Okay. So any of you that are going to access these slides, I just wanted to say that a sneeze can travel as far as 3 feet away. That's like unbelievable. You can be 3 feet away from a cough or a sneeze, and it can still come into our bodies through our nasal passages, through our mouths. Okay, next slide, please. So we don't really want particularly for our kids to walk around with masks. I mean, maybe I guess during certain epidemics, it might be a really good idea, but we want our kids to be able to feel like they can be strong and powerful, and we want to instill that in them. I always tell the story that I was working with a client once, and the kid came into my office and he had a fever, and the mother felt the kid's forehead and went, oh my gosh, you have such a high fever. And the little kid, if I could read their subtext, the kid was only 2 years old, went like this and went, oh, you're kidding me. I didn't even know I was so sick. And the mother's like, oh my God, Sarah Khan. And she calls her husband, oh my gosh, he's so hot. And the little kid, I know I'm reading the subtext, was like, oh, I didn't know I was so sick. So what happens is if we don't teach our children that viruses and bacteria are around and normal, and that fevers are healthy, then kids don't even understand that that they have the ability to fight it. So I always want you to tell your kid that you have superpower, you're like a superhero, you have these powers that can fight these bacteria and viruses. Okay, next slide. If we can. Okay, so again, our kids don't live in a bubble. Baruch Hashem, they don't live in a bubble. So our goal is that our child has the ability to breathe in the bacteria and viruses, have an immune system that will combat it. Now, I want to comment here that all children get sick 5 times a year on an average. It's typical for a healthy child to get sick 5 times a year. It's actually how they build up their immune system. What we don't like is when kids go from stuffy noses to ear infections to strep throat to bronchiolitis, back to an ear infection, back to strep throat. That's the cycle that we don't like. But if your kid just gets sick, spikes a high fever, you can support them with herbs. There's other things we can support them with, and that's a normal immune system. Next slide. Okay, so I want to talk about fevers for a moment. Obviously, if your child is not drinking, lethargic, has neck pain, you absolutely, of course, need to take them to the hospital, take them to the doctor and see what's going on. But a fever is really a bracha. A fever allows our children's bodies to rebalance themselves, and it allows them to actually get better. So if you have a bacteria or virus in the body, the brain will analyze it and say, I bet that this virus could be killed at 101.3. So the body starts to get hot, the child gets some hot and cold flashes. And then if you choose to give Tylenol or Advil, what happens is the fever will drop, and the brain will say, oh boy, I thought that I could fight this fever at 101.3. So the body will go up and raise the fever even higher and say, maybe the body needs to be at 103. You give Tylenol or Motrin, again, it drops down that fever. So I'm not saying that Tylenol or Motrin doesn't have a place. Of course it does. If your child has a splitting headache, if your child has a toothache, if neither one of you can sleep and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, Tylenol or Motrin is a fabulous idea. But when we're fighting infection, if the child can handle the fever, a lot of times my clients will call and say, my kid always gets sick, gets 103 fever. Should I give Tylenol or Advil? I'm like, well, how's your child handling it? Well, my child's still playing, still interacting. He's just burning up. That's okay. It's really, we need to treat the child's reaction, not the fever. So, you want to encourage kids to tell them that, again, I'm repeating myself, that they have these superpower ability to fight these infections. And what's missing in American culture is recovery time. I remember I was learning homeopathy with an Indian woman who was an MD, and she said, you know, in America, kids get strep throat, they give them an antibiotic, the next morning they're back in school. So the recovery time is very, very important for a child. The convalescent time, like when your child is really sick, they need to be home from school. And I know that's hard for people that work a lot, but we really need to understand that they need that recovery time. That's the time that they're going to eat some healthy foods, maybe just play a whole day, not have the stress of school. So once your kid is getting better, that extra day off will help build that immune system so that they don't pick up the next virus again. Next slide, please. Slide. There we go. So what can we do when our kids feel under the weather? We don't have to push foods on them, but small bites of what I call superfoods, I'm going to show you in the next page. Small sips of water. If they are really not able to eat, make them a smoothie. You want dense nutrients in a very small amount, like 1 teaspoon of a healthy food is more important than a whole bag of potato chips. And I know a lot of people get really nervous. My kid hasn't eaten for 2 days. But again, it's small bites of soups, smoothies, and make sure they have water. What else can we do to build the immune system? I mean, I'm an herbalist. We're going to be talking about herbs, but also laughter, dancing, jumping, and of course, my favorite herbs. So next slide, please. So some superfoods to me are foods that have these wonderful nutrients in them. They're oatmeal, a lot of B vitamins, which helps calm kids down, builds the immune system and lets them be calmer. Maple syrup is a phenomenal food to add. I add maple syrup whenever you can. Dates, that's very sweet. Kids like them. I mean, date syrup is famous all over the world. Lots of vitamins and nutrients. Blackstrap molasses is one of my favorite foods. Maybe we can put up the recipe later, Rebecca. But when my kids were homesick, I would make a drink with a tablespoon of blackstrap molasses, a tablespoon of honey, some hot water, and some almond milk. And my kids would drink it, and I knew that I was giving them a multivitamin. We consider blackstrap molasses poor person's multivitamin, and it's got tons and tons of nutrients. Black cherry concentrate, also berries, olive oil, fish oils, spinach. I always stick a little bit of spinach in my smoothies. It doesn't make the whole smoothie turn green. And honey is an amazing food. Next slide. So laughter, and you don't have to read all this text on it, but laughter, studies show that it builds the immune system, and our lives get really, really serious. We've got, Blee and Har, lots of us, a lot of kids in very small spaces. They've got to do their homework, get up, get to school, be clean, have baths, learn good manners. But it's really important to add laughter into our lives. And, like I tell my clients, like checklist, make sure you give your kids herbs, make sure they have healthy foods, laughter, it should be on our checklist, just like everything else. And that helps build the immune system. It helps with the lymphatic system. It brings joy to our hearts. There was an amazing book written by this doctor in like 1920. I have it in my office. And he writes back then, we don't know what it is, this peculiar thing called laughter, where the diaphragm starts shaking and vibrating inside the body. And we see that when the diaphragm vibrates, it vibrates all the internal organs inside our body. And we don't know exactly what it does, but it has to have some medicinal qualities because everybody feels better after a good laugh. So work on laughter. Next slide, please. So dancing is super important. I mean, your kids can laugh at you and say, oh my gosh, mom has totally lost it today. But, when things are dark and gloomy, it's the winter, it's snowy, you can't get outside. Instead of just being on your devices, which is, a whole nother discussion, put on music, start dancing. If your kids are going to laugh at you, that's totally fine. But really include that dancing in your life, because what happens is it actually moves the body. The lymphatic system goes from the neck down through our chest, out through our groin. And when you catch a bacteria or virus, it needs to leave the body through the lymphatic system. So go ahead, ladies. Let's dance out there. Put on that music. Next slide. Rebounding. Now, trampolines can be so dangerous. There's no question about it. But Blee and Hara, I have 7 children. I had a girl, 5 boys, and 15 years later, I had another girl. And, my kids being in a yeshiva, it was quite, anal retentive. They had to sit there, be good listeners, long days, and they would come home and be wacko, a little crazy, which is normal. And I actually bought a trampoline that fit under the bed. And when my kids came home, I would sit there and go 50 jumps per kid, 50 jumps. And they were like, Ma, really? And they jumped 1, 2, 3. And I knew that they were getting that blood flow through their body. I knew there was probably, like 20 kids in that classroom sneezing and coughing. I knew it was all over my kids' bodies and in their noses. So rebounding is amazing. It can actually help with nervousness and anxiety. It helps increase red blood cells. It's really an amazing, amazing exercise. Some of you live in big, gorgeous homes, and some of you live in teeny tiny apartments in Brooklyn. So both places need a little trampoline in their house. It really helps. And of course, you have to be there and monitor and make sure they're safe. Next slide. Slide. Okay, so I just wanted to give some of you a view. This is not my office, but it's a gorgeous herbalist office. So I wanted to let you know that herbal medicine has been used for the past 5,700 years. Back in the shtetl, we only had herbal medicine. It says in Tehillim that Hashem gave grass for the cattle and herbs for the service of man. The word there is service. Hashem also says that he put the refuah, the healing in the world before the illness. And when you look at days of creation, Hashem created plants and trees before man. I know that herbal medicine works. You have to give it more often. The downside of herbal medicine, which we're going to talk about now, you have to try to give it 3 times a day, whereas an antibiotic is usually given 1 time a day. But plants heal us. Our brain reads plants as food. It takes what it needs and it dispels what it doesn't. And what's very interesting about plants are the root of a plant can have a different action than the flower. The flower of the plant can have a different action than the seed. The seed can have a different action than the leaves. So we've got maybe 5, 6 different medicines from one plant. Amazing. Next slide. So I like herbs best in tincture or liquid form. Here is an herb that I make, and it's in liquid form. This is what a tincture looks like for those of you to see. Why do I like it better in tincture form? Because here's some plants. Here's some lavender and some I can't even pronounce that. Here, let me get this in the thing. There it is. It's different. So here's some lavender in this hand, some chrysanthemum, which is a famous herb that's used in China. And you take the herb like this, you pour some grain alcohol over it. Here's one of my herbs in tincture form. You let it sit for 6 to 8 weeks, then you strain it, and that way you have the medicine. So the reason I like it in tincture form is because when you buy parsley at the store, you buy your parsley, it's beautiful and green. You put it in your fridge. By the next day, it's a little wilty. By the next day, it gets a little bit yellow. A couple days later, it's like white, and you throw it away. So once you take plants out of the ground, they lose their potency very quickly. If you take the plant out of the ground and you put it in tincture or liquid form, the benefit to it is that the alcohol or glycerite for children will break down the components of the plant, and the liquid will actually have all the vitamins and nutrients and the medicinal properties of the plant. Next page, please. Next slide. Thank you so much. So you can get some herbs in capsule form. I don't love herbs in capsule form. First of all, our kids can't swallow the herbs in capsule form. And the problem with capsules are that we lose a lot of the essential oils that are part of the plant. And in tea form is great, but we're not so much of a tea culture. We don't have tea time like English folks, and we don't have tea ceremonies like Japanese people. So teas have not really been part of our culture. You can take some of the herbs I'm going to discuss, make them into popsicles for the kids. You can make them into ice cubes for the kids. But basically with our OCD, crazy, type A personality, overachieving lives that we live, a tincture like this is going to be your absolute best way to give herbs to your kids. Next slide. Rebecca, we lost our slides. Colds. Next slide, next slide, next slide. There we go. Okay, so here we go. You'll also hear about teas in infusions. That is in the bottle, the jars. You can take your plants, put water over them, let them sit for a couple hours, strain them and make a tea. And certain herbs you can make in syrup form. The base of syrup is usually a honey, and they're absolutely delicious. I suggest buying them from people that know how to make the syrups, and then you can watch YouTube videos and learn how to make them on your own. Next slide, please. So I do not represent any company. I want to let you know I'm here to just give you knowledge. I do represent my book, Moodtopia, which I do speak about herbs and essential oils for the mind. But other than that, no other companies. Here are some of the herbs that I like. I like Herbalists and Alchemists, which has a hechsher on it. That's where it says herbs for kids. I love Herb Farm by the herbalist Ed Smith. And I like the company called Wish Garden Herbs. They've come out with some really great herbs like Kick-Ass Immune and Get Over It. And these mixtures, combinations are great. I'm going to now talk about the individual herbs because I want to empower you. I find that, so let me tell you, I'm an herbalist and a classical homeopath. So with herbal medicine, our goal as herbalists is to empower our patients, clients, to learn how to use the herbs, do them themselves. With homeopathy, I do believe that it's a very complicated medical system, and you should work with a professional. But what studies have shown is that when adult patients post-surgery are in charge of their own morphine intake with a morphine pump, they end up taking less medication than when a nurse gives them the painkillers. So one thing about herbs is, like, if one of your kids has a drippy nose, you give herbs to all your kids because you want to build that immune system right away. If your kids are feeling better, but you know that there's a lot of strep throat in the classroom, you know that it's cold and flu time, then you can give herbs to the kids once a day. And if a kid's sick, you can give it 2, 3, or even 4 times a day. Next slide. So when I go to give my clients herbs for kids, I get a little shot glass. I put in a little bit of grape juice. I put in the herbs and I give it to kids with a dropper. Once your kid gets a little bit bigger, you can buy them their own shot glass, give them a little bit of grape juice with the herb, make a l'chaim to their health, and then give them another shot of grape juice after to thank them for taking the herbs. When kids are little, I like it better with the dropper. And I'm a big advocate. Herbs are quite bitter. But it says that when the Yidden, the Jews, were complaining that the water was bitter, Moshe Rabbeinu took a bitter stick, put it in the bitter water, and the water became sweet. So we know as herbalists that bitter cures. It stimulates the liver. The liver is what metabolizes and breaks down the vitamins and nutrients. So your herbs are always going to be a little bit bitter. So give your kids a chocolate chip after they take them. Let them look forward to that chocolate chip. They take their bitter herbs with a little grape juice, give them a chocolate chip, because I want to get those herbs in them. Next slide, please. So I want to begin. We're going to go quite quickly through the herbs. I just want to introduce them to you. I'm sorry that my picture cut off the name astragalus. Astragalus is an herb that's been used in Asia for generations. The plant is a beautiful plant, and you see the bark of the plant is put in soups and stews. And in Asia, they will take the astragalus and just add it into their foods because it helps build the immune system. It's controversial as to whether you can use it when kids have a fever. I haven't found a lot of research on that maybe that's an old wives' tale, or maybe it's just not one of the herbs of choice for fever. So now, those of you that are not herbalists, you're going to buy blends like this. You're going to go ahead and start with, here we go, a blend of herbs. But I'm just showing you the herbs so that when they're in the blend, you can start to understand their action, because knowledge is power. Next slide, please. Catnip is an amazing herb. Now, catnip, there's two ways to make herbs. One is in a grain alcohol and one is in a glycerite. When you make the herbs in a grain alcohol, it extracts the properties more. But for kids, I'll always add half glycerite, half alcohol to my blends. I'm not concerned about children taking grain alcohol. Alcohol in and of itself is a healer. And catnip is one of those herbs that tastes just delicious in a glycerite. It's for stomach aches. It's for fevers. It's for coughs. It can help with sleep problems. And a lot of different blends actually have a catnip that you can rub on the gums when a baby is teething. So when you're looking at your cough or your immune blends, catnip should be in there. Next slide. Cleavers is an herb that helps with the lymphatic system. When you have a sore throat, you want to push that virus or bacteria through the lymphatic system, and cleavers is one of those amazing herbs that work beautifully. Kids that have chronic strep throat, the bacteria can get lodged in their tonsils, cause swollen adenoids, and cleavers will help just get all that junk out of the system. Next slide, please. Echinacea, we all know about. It's a beautiful flower. Look at how gorgeous it is. You know, it's so interesting because I listened to tons and tons of lectures by herbalists. And this one herbalist said, when my patients come, we walk through my herb garden and I let them see all the plants that are growing. Now, my office is in Brooklyn, New York. So I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, like there's nothing growing much in Brooklyn. It's not true. I want to tell you that in spring, if you come to one of my medicinal weed walks, you will see that through the cracks of the concrete, herbs grow. I mean, herbs are here to heal us, and no matter what the weather changes, no matter, you know, what goes on with the pollution in our air, come spring, our plants pop up at the right time and they're there. Would I make my medicines from Brooklyn, New York? No, I wouldn't. But I do take us on weed walks just so you can see and be amazed that Hashem indeed put the refuah right here in the world. But echinacea is a gorgeous plant. And again, I don't have a beautiful medicinal herb garden to show my clients. So thank God for smartphones, because I'm always like, look at this gorgeous plant you're getting. Echinacea is being harvested right now. Most of the time we harvest a lot of our plants in the spring and summer, and then certain plants like the root happens in the fall and even into winter. And echinacea, we use the root. We use other parts, but it's the root. It helps modulate the immune system. It's called an immunomodulator. It is not true that you need to take echinacea, go on and off and on and off. That's kind of a little bit of a wives' tale. It's good for viral, it's antiviral, it's antibacterial, colds, flus, ear infections. It's not great with blood type O's. So if you're a blood type O, don't waste your money on echinacea. It's not going to hurt you, but it's not going to work as efficiently. Next slide, please. Elecampane, look at that exotic flower, amazing. Elecampane is an herb that tastes horrible. And it is so amazing at getting mucus out of the lungs and getting rid of mucus in the system. It is an expectorant. And it's very funny because when I say it tastes horrible, I put it in kids' blends all the time and they never complain about it. My teacher was like, I would never give elecampane to a kid. It tastes like perfume. And I got to tell you, when kids are sick, they take it, they start coughing up all that junk. It starts coming out their nose, out their mouth. And then like 48 hours later, they're like, I feel so much better. Next herb. Elderberry is a very popular herb. It's the #1 selling herb. Here's my hands. I'm a little off center on Amazon. The one that's #1 seller on Amazon has a lot of honey and sugar, and it's basically giving your kid a sugar drink, which is fine if you want. But elderberry is a little bit bitter. We do add some glycerite to make it sweet. It is a berry. It helps with veins. For those of you that have varicose veins, elderberry will help with that with other berries. It's good for sore throats. It's an antioxidant. It does taste yummy. I have some elderberry right here. I don't know if you'll be able, let me give it to you this way. Here's the berries. They're dried. Let's get it in front of the camera there. And I love elderberry. I don't use elderberry alone for viruses. I don't believe, I know that studies in Israel have shown that elderberry is antiviral. I don't think it works well enough alone. I mix it with a lot of other herbs. It's one of the herbs that I would mix together, and it's very high in vitamin C. Next slide. Elderflower is actually one of my favorites. It is so gorgeous. I live in California in the summers. If anybody's out there, I see clients, and I live in Brooklyn in the winters. And I was hiking this beautiful canyon in LA, and all of a sudden I turned to my right, and there were these stunning elderflowers. I mean, it is such a captivating a sight to see. This is specific as an antihistamine. It helps with congested sinuses, whereas elderberry, and here we go, here's the plant that has many different components to it. Elderberry is very high in vitamin C, helps you with viruses, but elderflower is an antihistamine. So I always add elderflower with elderberry. Next slide, please. Eyebright is an herb that's on the endangered species list. I have to let you know, I don't think most of you are going out there foraging and picking this plant. I use a lot of it in my office. I know a lot of herbalists are like, oh my gosh, don't overuse Eyebright, but man, there's nothing better to get rid of the fluid in the eustachian tubes than Eyebright. In the allergy season, we can use it for itchy eyes, but if you've got a kid with chronic fluid, I mean, Eyebright's got to be in that mix. Next slide, please. Japanese honeysuckle is an herb that is delicious. It helps build the immune system, viral infections, and helps with sore throats. Again, I don't know if there are herbalists out there listening or just moms that want to be moms, aunts, bubbies that just want to be more knowledgeable. You don't have to memorize these plants. I just want to introduce them to you. Herbalists believe that herbs are our gift from planet Earth, and that they're here for us. And with pharmaceutical companies that have kind of taken over healthcare, and believe me, I'm not anti-antibiotic. They have their place. Give me an Advil if I have a headache. In my office, we're not against Western medicine. We just feel that it's being overused. And for a cold, I mean, herbs work so beautifully. And with chronic ear infections, I mean, there's a lot of steps that we can take before you put tubes in the ear. So Japanese honeysuckle, delicious, not in many blends in America. Next slide. Lemon balm. Oh, I'm so sorry that my plant is covering that lemon balm. I'm gonna have to go back and edit it. Lemon balm is one of the herbs that everybody should know about. It's calming and soothing and antiviral. You can get a little tincture of lemon balm and bring it on an airplane with you and give it to your kids at the airport. This is 2 ounces. No, this is a 1 ounce bottle. You can bring this to the airport with you. It calms and soothes wild kids. It does not make you too sleepy, but it takes the edge off of stress. And it's given for kids of all ages, geriatric patients. This is a yummy plant that you can add honey to and make it into ice pops for when kids have fevers. Next slide. Linden is an herb that helps with tummy aches and stomach aches. It helps people calm down and go to sleep. In France, it is a very popular tea given after a meal that's got too much fat and too heavy of a meal. Linden calms and soothes. So this is an herb that I would use in a fever mix. I would mix it with the elderflower that we discussed earlier. Elderflower is also a bit of a refrigerant. That means that it cools the body down. One of the things with fever is when you're giving herbs to support a fever, we're supporting the child during their fever. We don't necessarily want the fever to come down. We want them to still be able to drink with a fever and feel comfortable with a fever, but we don't want to get rid of that fever because that fever is fighting an infection. Next slide. Marshmallow. This is where the candy marshmallow came from. So there's a plant called marshmallow, and it was used by Native Americans and people all over the world when you had a sore throat or a stomach ache. If you take the marshmallow plant, put it in a cup, pour some hot water over it, you'll get this white fluff on top, and that's what kids used to eat off with a spoon. Marshmallow helps with stomach aches during stomach flus, and it's a wonderful, wonderful plant. Yeah, you can give your kids some marshmallows, but those have a lot of sugar in them, and this plant doesn't. Next slide, please. Osha root is used for asthma. It's used for that chronic winter cough, and it helps clear the lungs. It was very interesting because I just learned that bears, after hibernation, because their sleep pattern is different when they're in hibernation, when they come out in the world, they need to be vibrant and strong and be able to run and climb trees. And they chew on Osha root, and it opens up the lungs and gives them strength. One of my favorite plants. Next slide. Yarrow, we use it for fevers. It's also a wound healer. A lot of my clients that have chronic staining, which is great. We can have another webinar on that. But yarrow, more than shepherd's purse, I use. It's a wound healer, and it also helps with fevers. And again, with fevers, we're supporting the child. We're telling them they're a superhero. Oh my gosh, you have the best immune system in the world. That's what you want to tell kids. You want to say, wow, your fever is your superpower. That is what's going to get you through the winter, through the fall. And they're going to feel proud that they have a fever. Wow, I didn't know that having a fever was a superpower. Whoa. And you want to give them yarrow and linden and lemon balm and elderflower so that they can drink a little, maybe take a couple bites of food while they're having their fever. Next slide. So yerba santa is an herb that's not so popular a lot in Arizona and New Mexico. It is phenomenal for that thick, gross mucus. Oh my gosh, you know those kids that like have this beautiful smile, but they have like green stuff like plastered against their face, or they always have a little green mucus coming out? That's where yerba santa comes in. It's in every one of my mixes for my kids. Again, I make my own mixes in my office because I'm a little OCD type A personality control freak basically around my clients. But yerba santa is going to be in there, and that thick mucus in the eustachian tubes. Again, tubes can save some kids' lives, but when we're putting a tube there, we're still secreting that same mucus. It's just going from point A to another point in the body. When you work with an herbalist, we want to stop the body from producing that excess mucus. Next slide. Wild cherry bark is from a beautiful tree, and that helps the spasming of coughs. You know those kids that lay in bed and maybe they can sleep, but you can't because they're like, I know you all can relate. You're 3 bedrooms away, and you're like, you can still hear that kid having that nighttime cough. So what you want to do is you want to give them some wild cherry bark. It'll calm that cough down and help heal that cough. And also nervous coughs. Sometimes kids, you know, when they're getting a little bit older and tests come in and they're getting really nervous and they get like this kind of spasmodic cough, wild cherry bark is great for that. Next slide, please. So I want to end with homeopathy. Homeopathy is a whole nother discussion. Let me grab a homeopathic remedy. I forgot to grab one. Hold on, folks. Here we go. So homeopathy is different than herbs. Some homeopathic remedies are made from herbs and some are made from minerals and roots and bacteria. You usually get a homeopathic remedy that looks something, got to get that like this. These do have some dairy in them. It's less than 1/60th. So the Rabbanim allow you to use this, this homeopathic remedy. In my office, though, we do have parva remedies that do not have any dairy in them. Can you see the little ballies? So homeopathy is the energy of a plant, bark, root, mineral, poison, bacteria. It's diluted, and it's shook or succussed. When they go to make the remedy, they succuss it or shake it like this. And it stimulates the immune system to heal itself. When you take an herb, the herb is going inside the body and it's working on the lymphatic system and it's giving nutrients. One thing about plants are they have a lot of dense nutrients in them. So the herbs go in and heal swollen tissue. You know, I had a client that came in the other day and this kid's nasal secretions, it's been months, thick, disgusting mucus for months. So we would say that the tissue is what is called boggy tissue, meaning in the nasal passages, the tissue is so lax that it can't even firm itself up and fix the problem. Imagine you put your foot in some water, in a little bucket of water, and you left it there for 20 minutes. It would get a little crinkly, right? If you left it there for 2 days, your toes would just, the tissue would just almost be disintegrating. So when kids have chronic stuffy noses or chronic fluid in their ears, the tissue becomes boggy and the tissue needs to be taut and strong so that it can get rid of what it needs to. So herbs will come in and fix tissue damage, fix the lymphatic system. It will stimulate the immune system. A homeopathic remedy is different because it just shifts energy in a person's body. And this is so hard to explain. But if your kid is got a stuffy nose and complaining and fetchy and not in a good place, the homeopathic remedy will shift the energy so the body can start repairing itself. So the man Hahnemann, Samuel Hahnemann, that first brought homeopathy or taught homeopathy, revealed it into the world, did speak a lot about if the person was missing the vitamins and nutrients needed for healing, the homeopathic remedy may not work as well. So that's one of the reasons I use herbs, because in the herbs, if you look at these gorgeous plants, there's all these vitamins and minerals. So let's go to the next slide and then we'll open up for questions. Next slide, please. So I just want to run through these homeopathic remedies very quickly, just so they're familiar in your mind. Aconite is a remedy given at the first sign of sickness. Again, I'm an herbalist, but that doesn't mean you can't give a dose of aconite. It's also if kids had a sudden shock, if they witnessed, God forbid, a car accident, or their sister fell and broke their leg and needed a cast, any kind of shock to the system. Allium cepa is for those kids that just clear liquid pours out of their nose. It just pours out of their nose. It's like someone turned on the faucet. It's pouring out. They can also have liquid pouring out of their eyes. Arsenicum is for the drippy noses that make their upper lip red, like they have like a red mustache here. The discharge is very acrid. Belladonna is very famous for fevers. Again, when a child has a fever, we're supporting them. We're not trying to get rid of the fever. Chamomile is a homeopathic remedy everybody should have in their house. It's for kids that get angry. You can't give it to your kids every day. You got to figure out what's going on. But you know that kid that's just like, they don't want anything. They want you to hold them, but they don't want you to hold them. They won't let you put them down, but they're wiggling in your arms. They're just angry, like you try to give them something to drink and they push it aside. That's chamomile. Euphrasia is for kids that get sick in their eyes. Their eyes are itchy, used a lot for allergies. Eupatorium is a great flu remedy, the flu remedy that goes all the way into your bones. Like, oh my gosh, you're lying in bed and it's not that your muscles and tissue hurts, it's all the way into your bones. Ferrum phos is another homeopathic remedy that helps circulate blood in the system. So if a kid's been lying in bed and not moving around, ferrum phos can help move that blood, which can get rid of the bacteria and viruses. Hepar sulph is for chronic ear infections or chronic strep throat, something that's just been in the body for too long. Oxacillium, I don't even know if I pronounced that correctly. That in clinical studies show that in patients under age 40 that take this homeopathic remedy at the first signs within the first 24 hours of a flu have a shorter duration of the flu and less symptoms. It is actually a homeopathic remedy that has incredible data on it, something to have in the house. And pulsatilla is for fetchy, clingy kids. They're maybe not as angry as chamomile. When their nose drips, as opposed to allium cepa that's clear or arsenicum that's clear, it's yellow. It's just that yellow discharge. So that's a little bit of an introduction to homeopathy. There's no eating or drinking 5 minutes before. Got to get in front of the camera. 5 minutes before or 5 minutes after, whereas herbs can be taken with or without food. You pour the homeopathic remedy into the cap. You do not touch the little ballies. It does not need to go under a child's tongue. It can go on top of the tongue, but there's no eating or drinking 5 minutes before or 5 minutes after. People used to say 20 minutes before. That's not true. Okay, last slide, please. So I would love everybody to join me on social media. I know that's so obnoxious to say, but especially on my Instagram, I 2 or 3 times a week put up a little 2-minute clip on an herb or something that's going on, if there's a flu in the area, and they're little quick bites of information. I'm trying to put it up on my Facebook page also. You can visit my website, which is Moodtopia Book. You can text me, you can email me, and you can be in touch with me. I do want to conclude with mentioning my book. It's not about children's colds and flus. It's called Moodtopia. I wrote it after working with over 25,000 moms and babies. And I found that women that are powerful, fantastic, in control, very often feel like they're getting hijacked by their moods, their sadness, their frustration. And Moodtopia talks about herbs and aromatherapy and also random acts of kindness, the effects of color. It's a book that I think every woman should have in their house. And I tell my clients, a lot of my clients are like, Sarah Chana, who has time to read books anymore? And I'm like, it's just like Alcoholics Anonymous. They say 1 day at a time. With Moodtopia, I say 1 page at a time. It's a book where you can just pick up and read 1 page and mull it through, and it'll give you a lot of insight. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for Enriched Parenting, Rebecca and her team. These are wonderful and important webinars that you're doing. And when women get more knowledge, they get empowered. And when they're empowered, baby, we can change the world.
That's right. Sarah Chana, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, awesome. So first of all, I just want to thank everyone who joined us today on social media as well. I noticed that on Facebook, they can't see your face, and it seems like they can only see mine, unfortunately. But so that's why I actually muted myself at that point. so I just thank you so much for all this information. Like you said, knowledge is power. And, one of the things that I always say and advocate is that people, I find oftentimes make decisions from a place of fear. They're afraid, especially when our children are sick, we can become we feel scared or we feel vulnerable, but when we have the knowledge and we have the tools, we can feel empowered in just that alone, that we know what to do and we don't have to react from a place of fear.
I want to say on that note, and then we'll answer the questions, that like a lot of my clients used to travel for Rosh Hashanah, they'd travel for Sukkot, they'd go to Israel for a bar mitzvah, and they would find that they'd get there and one or two of their kids would get sick and it would ruin the whole vacation. So once they came to me, I would give them like 1 bottle of immune herbs and 1 bottle of fever herbs. And they said it just changed their lives, Rebecca. They would like give their kids some immune herbs before they went on a plane. I mean, obviously 10 hours on a plane. And then they'd get to Israel or wherever their destination, they'd give herbs and they stopped having to find doctors everywhere they went. And also, if you have like a wedding and your kids are not going to be sleeping for a couple days, give them immune herbs. If you have a Shabbos guest and that person, the little kid had a sore throat, you give them. So when you have herbs, you can give it to build that immune system so you're not in the doctor's office all the time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, first of all, one person actually asked, and I'll just go right into that question because it's relevant to what you were just saying. One person asked about if they're, like you're saying, these blends, that these are specific blends that you've made.
No, these are other companies. I'm working on making my own blends, but I'm so busy seeing patients. So on that slide, I did talk about herbalists and alchemists, Herb Farm and Wish Garden Herbs, and they are making really good blends. I mean, of course, Rebecca, I like my blends better, but getting any kind of immune booster or an immune blend is a really great way to start. And then as my clients become more educated, some of them make their own blends, or we find exactly what blends work for them. For instance, a lot of kids in their families, their kids always get fluid in their ears. Other families, their kids never get fluid in their ears. Other families, they always get strep throat. Other families never get strep throat. So when they work with me, Rebecca, we give them a blend for their challenges, right? We've got kids that always get eczema when they get sick. So really the best thing to do is, of course, work with an herbalist and figure out your own blend. But if you can't do that, these blends are phenomenal. Hold on one second. I'm so sorry. Maria. Thank you so much. I don't know. Not supposed to have a client yet. Thank you. Okay, let's go.
Okay.
If she's there, just put her in my office. Yeah, thanks. Go ahead.
Someone asked the question, where would you recommend we buy tincture herbs from? And do you have a favorite place or brand? So you mentioned in the slides those few companies.
Yes, you can buy them on Amazon now. Again, I don't represent any company, but the companies Herb Farm, Herbalist and Alchemist, and Wish Garden are the 3 top that I'm recommending for people that can't work with an herbalist. And it says here, do herbs expire? How long can you keep them for? And is she here for pickup? Okay, tell her 10 minutes. They have a 10-year shelf life, which is amazing. A 10-year shelf life. When I add glycerite to it, then it has about a 2 or 3 year shelf life. So yes. Okay.
And then Mary asked, can your body become immune to herbs that are taken too much? Like can herbs and tea dehydrate you?
So interesting. So here's the answer to that. Like, can you get immune to like eating blueberries? You know what I mean? Can you get immune to like putting parsley in your salad? So the answer is no. I do like to change herbs. Like there's different herb blends that I'll give in the summer because kids are running and there's the heat and they're perspiring. And in the winter, I'll give more warming herbs. So I like to change kids' blends, but no, you can take an immune herb every day for the rest of your life and you will be just fine.
Amazing. The next one was Chaya Levowitz. She asked about repeating the signs to go to the ER.
Okay, I will do that. And I want to say one more thing, Rebecca, that I found. So this is what I find with my clients. Like when all the kids are sick, everybody's taking the immune herbs. Then when they're not sick, moms forget, they get busy, they move on to other things. And then so I've never found my clients to overuse their herbs. either emotionally with the book from Utopia or with their kids with allergies or cold and flu, because when kids are better or we're better, we just move on to other things. So what was that last question again? I'm so sorry.
So I think to repeat, what are the signs to go to the ER?
Yes, very important. And I do go over that with my kids, my clients all the time. If your kid is vomiting profusely and not drinking fluids, get to the ER. If your child has diarrhea and vomiting and it's been 24 hours and they're not taking in fluids, go get an IV. If a kid has a high fever with a stiff neck and light is bothering them, that God forbid could be meningitis, go to the ER. If a kid started throwing up blood, go to the ER. So you have to use your wise woman wisdom, which we all have inside of ourselves. But again, stuffy noses, fevers that come and go, sore throats. And what I tell my clients to do all the time, Rebecca, because I think I'm a really responsible practitioner, is go to the doctor, get a diagnosis, get the prescription for the meds, come home and try herbs. If the herbs are not working, you have the medication and you can go back to the doctor. When people come to me for chronic ear infections, Rebecca, we get a diagnosis from the doctor. We treat the ear infection for 2 to 6 weeks. We go back and recheck the ear infection. For kids with strep, we'll get a streptococcal test. We'll treat the patient. You go back and recheck. So we're not dissing Western medicine. We're just using another kind of medicine. I remember the first time I went to support a client during strep. I'm a homeopath and a master herbalist. I'm not a doctor. I can't treat. So we were supporting. So my mentor, Mashbi at the time, was an Indian MD. And I said, oh my gosh, strep throat. She said, Sarhana, you're treating the client just in another way. So I don't really believe in letting kids have ear infections and not treating them. I think that's cruel. I think you need to help them. I don't think it's fair to not support a child during a fever. What does that mean? That means that we want to support our kids. We just don't want to ignore them and do nothing. Next question.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Probiotics to be in liquid. Is it important for probiotics to be in liquid form? Does that, and is there one that comes in kosher? Chaya Stern asked that question.
So probiotics should be in powder form because they're actually grown on a root and it's actually a powder form that you have to scrape off the plant that it's growing on. Unfortunately, my favorite brand is from Claire Labs, Klaire Labs, and they do not have a hechsher, but they're vegetarian, vegan, no dairy. And I mean, I have to be honest, that's my favorite brand.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Okay. And they actually, what's great about Claire Labs is they have for infants, they have for children, they have for adults. And okay, great. So the next one would be, I think it's almost getting to the end. Can your body's immune system, oh no, we already did that one. Sorry. What age can you start tincture form of herbs for children?
So, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, we have kids that have RSV and they've been in the hospital and they're not better and herbs work beautifully. At that age, I would work with a practitioner. Maybe I would put some of the herbs in glycerite. I'm not afraid of alcohol. I mean, if I have clients that are part of Alcoholics Anonymous and they don't want herbs in tincture form, but really the amount of alcohol, and we're talking for an infant, 3 drops of the tincture. For a 4-year-old, we're talking 15 drops of the tincture. So I feel really confident with tinctures. They work efficiently. They're called botanical medicine. So we are using medicine. We're just using plant-based medicine, but we're not. And Rebecca, I think the most important thing to know is we're not ignoring a child's symptoms. We're not denying children care. We're just using another form of medicine. And, back to the ER, I mean, if your kid breaks a leg, do me a favor, go to the ER and get a cast. But that doesn't mean that you can't give a homeopathic remedy or an herb to help build that bone. If your kid needs stitches, do me a favor, run to the ER and get stitches. But that doesn't mean that you can't use a homeopathic remedy to help heal those stitches. So when I speak, and I do lectures all over the world, we're combining alternative with conventional medicine. We're taking the MRIs, we're taking the CAT scans, we're taking the blood tests, and we're using them to our benefit. But plants have been here forever, Rebecca, and they have been lost. They're not part of our medicinal treatment, and they are phenomenal.
Amazing. Khani asks, can you give a general mode of giving homeopathic acutely? How often and how many balls?
So it depends on where you get the ballies. Boron is 3 pellets. Mine are microscopically small because I do so much pediatrics. So mine are between 8 and 15. So if a kid breaks a leg, you would give arnica every 15 minutes for an hour, then a dose every hour for 3 hours after that with a broken bone. If a kid has a high fever, you can also give a 30C every 15 minutes for 3 doses and see if it's kicking in. Sometimes you can go up to 200. I don't use 1Ms with acute, and each situation will be different. Like if a kid has chronic fluid in their ears, that's not acute. I'm going to give a low dose for a long period of time. Whereas if a kid spikes a fever, we'll give it every 15 minutes, then every hour for a couple doses.
Okay. Thank you so much. Are there any adverse reactions to taking herbs? I'm also going to put in there for those who are, let's say, using, if their child is on any medications, are there certain medications that they should be avoiding? Or is that something they would have to ask? I assume.
That's the time to call a master herbalist to know about that drug herb interaction. Most of us really know the actions of the pharmaceuticals, and we know the actions of the herbs. So obviously, if we have a patient on a blood thinner medicine and we know that an herb is a blood thinning agent, we're not going to give them at the same time. So herbalists are pretty darn smart. Like we really study anatomy and physiology. As a homeopath, I did a 5-year program, disease process, disease, how it manifests in the body. And we really know quite a bit. If your child's on Ritalin or any ADD medicine, herbs like lemon balm and linden will be fine, but you should really check with an herbalist for sure.
Okay, great. Let me ask you something on a side note in terms of the blood type. I know you mentioned that in there at one point, but there was echinacea is not good for type O. How do you even explain to people, or explain to, I'm just for myself, the history behind the importance of blood type, and should we all as parents know each of our children's blood type?
So that's another workshop. That's a good hour workshop, and you just hit, a really big topic. It's too complicated at this point. I just mentioned the blood type O and echinacea because a lot of people will say, I took echinacea, didn't do anything. I was like, oh yeah, because you're a blood type O, not a blood type A. Yes, I do believe that everybody should know their blood typing. It's very peculiar that there are 4 blood types. I do believe it affects our diseases, our ability to heal. I think the foods we eat. So let's do another lecture on that because it is complicated. But yes, you should know as much as you can about your child. Blood typing is important. And, if you do use a pharmaceutical, what I tell my clients is you need to ask the doctor in his scribble, what medicine am I picking up at the pharmacy? You want the generic name and the pharmaceutical name. And when you get to the pharmacy, you want to confirm that is that medicine. And then you want to look up on your phone and make sure that pill or that liquid looks the same. I heard of a girl, young, beautiful girl. She had strep throat. Her mother went and picked up a medication. The little girl ended up in a coma because the pharmacist gave her a liquid heart medicine. So do not rely on the pharmacist. Do not rely on the doctors. You make sure it's our responsibility. And it's so funny because I had a client in my office. I'm also a lactation consultant. And I was taking her history and she goes, yeah, I had a really bad reaction to a medicine in the hospital. I said, which one was it? She goes, you know that little yellow pill? I'm like, no, I don't know that little yellow pill. She goes, you know, it was that little yellow pill. I was like, you call right now and find out the medicine. So it is there. You know, the average doctor, they don't make that much money anymore. They get 6 minutes per patient. I often have doctors that shadow me in my office, and I had a doctor that had just finished medical school and she was working in acute care. She got docked pay because she would spend more than 7 minutes per patient, got docked pay. 6 minutes was her time. She said, I can't take a history, diagnose, write a prescription, and fill out my chart in 6 minutes. They said, that's what we do here. So whenever my kids have a doctor's appointment, I book a double session. They hate me. I'm like, I'm putting on a timer. I want 12 minutes with my doctor. 12. They're like, your child can't have a double session. I said, 12 minutes. And I literally will like block the door and go, you're not leaving till I've answered all my questions, because it's not fair. They can't do their jobs anymore. So check your pharmaceuticals.
That's amazing. I mean, on that note, what I want to just add in there is two things. First of all, it's funny. I remember my parents are both medical doctors, they're physicians. My father, their biggest complaint about my father was that he was spending too much time with each of his patients.
Yes.
So it's just a funny thing. And but secondly, also being that the third leading cause of death is medical error, I think that all the more so, like the statistics have shown us over and over again that we can't have that blind faith. We have to be educated. We have to be informed. We have to be questioning, and we have to do our due diligence in making these decisions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. And I want, when you work with an herbalist, and this is not a sales pitch for me, I'm just trying to give people the other side. I spend an hour and a half with a patient. Like if they can't, come for an hour and a half, they can't come to me. By the time I introduce myself, by the time I understand who their child is, what their child is, what kind of food, what does their stool look like? How often are they urinating? What do they like to drink? Do they like to play? Are they coordinated? Are they a little clumsy? Like an hour and a half, I'm still like, oh my gosh, I barely know this person. Like, I can't work like that, because there's no two people that have the same flu. There's no two people that have the same cold. There's no two kids that have the same ear infection, and to find out what is the individual way that this person manifests their challenges in life, then we can begin. Then and only then can we truly begin to treat the person and not the disease. And I think that's the important thing. We treat the person with the condition or disease, not the disease.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. So I know Chani just mentioned there is a lot of controversy about the blood type diets.
Yes.
Right. So I guess that's something we could always talk about another time.
Let's do a workshop on it, Chani. And I understand that when I give my workshop, it's not just going to be about the diet. It's going to be the manifestation of disease and illness with different blood types. Whether the blood type diet is perfect or not, what Dr. Diadamo, his father, was doing was researching how food turns into blood. It's interesting because it says in the Gemara that Hashem, God, makes a chesed and turns the breast milk from red to white, so women are not repulsed by breastfeeding their babies. So the reason I got into it was because I deal with so much breast milk, and I see that when women tweak their diets to their blood type diet, babies are less colicky. So we won't discuss whether it's valid or not. We'll just discuss the clinical research that's out there.
Amazing. And I'm going to end with that, because I know we ran late today.
Yes.
We started late, but I want to thank you so much. And I'm going to just affirm what Chani said. Yes, yes, yes. We would love more workshops from you.
Thank you.
I think the blood, all about the blood type diets would be fascinating.
Absolutely.
So that sounds great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, for your questions.
All the best. And be in touch, everyone.
Sarah Chana, I just want to remind everyone, you can reach Sarah Chana on social media. She's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can follow us here at Enriched Parenting also on Facebook, Instagram. And you'll get updates on our upcoming webinars, our monthly newsletters, all of those wonderful things. So thank you so much, Sarah Chana. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you, Rebecca.
Bye, guys. Thank you.